get started here. I'm very happy to have, I think, probably my best friend here. We were in the same Ph.D. department at Berkeley. We both studied planetary science. And then both somehow got dragged into the world of nutrition and sustainability. So it's nice to have her here. All right, go ahead, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So as I said, my name is Alyssa Rhoden, and I maintain a blog on food sustainability called An Off-the-Board Decision, and I've noted the URL here because a lot of the details of the calculations that I'm going to show you, I don't have time to explain in detail. So in the next couple of weeks, I'll put up all of the charts and numbers so that you guys can figure out what I did wrong. So without further ado, so world hunger is a major and very compelling problem that we have. So 850 million people in our world are starving. And something that doesn't get quite as much attention is that 2 billion people suffer from malnutrition. Malnutrition kills more than 2.5 million children every year. And 1 in 4 children have their growth stunted due to malnutrition, which is something from which they never recover. 250 million preschool children are vitamin A deficient, and this deficiency can lead to blindness. Half of the children who go blind from vitamin A deficiency die within a year. So these are major issues that should be a part of any discussion about how we're going to feed the world in the future. So the leading solution that's been proposed to feed the world is to produce more calories. There's 2 ways that are talked about for doing this. One is expanding grain production, and the other is diverting grains from animal feed to human feed, which is mostly relevant for corn and somewhat for soy, because those are the foods that we grow in these vast monocultures. Oh no, I did it. Food industry has found out about my talk. All right, well, I'll just, there we go, continue. So we grow these grains in vast monocultures, and then we feed them to confined animals, mostly cows. So the focus of my talk is looking at this question of should we eat our corn instead of feeding it to animals? And if we do that, what kind of food do we produce? What are the trade-offs between corn versus other food that we could grow on that land? And finally, of course, can we feed the world by eating more corn? All right, well, to focus on corn for a moment. So we harvest corn on 83 million acres of land, which is roughly the same amount of land that we devote to our entire national park system. 52% of that corn never contributes anything to the calories in our food supply. And that's because 40% of it is used for ethanol fuel and 12% of it is exported. A further 37% does produce calories indirectly because we feed it to animals, which we then consume. And that leaves only 11% as the portion that is used for something that the USDA classifies as food. So the question is, could we produce more calories if we used our corn to make food in the food category instead of making indirect food by feeding it to animals? And the answer is yes. So I estimated the caloric output of our current crop, so from 2011, and I estimated that we produced about 2 million calories per acre from corn. If we instead used the corn that we feed to animals to create corn food, we would create 2.5 million calories, so an increase. And then if we actually used all 83 million acres of corn to create food, then we would make more than 5 million calories per acre. So great. And if you've been seeing all my slides, you can see now. Great. Yes. Okay, excellent pie chart showing distribution of corn. All right. And here we go. So yes, we can make more calories. And there's a much more sophisticated version of this study done by Cassidy et al. Just recently came out showing essentially the same thing. You can get a lot more calories. But I keep putting food in quotation marks here, and the reason is because we have to really understand what it is that we're producing when we say food. These are the food uses of the 2011 corn harvest. 37% went to the production of high fructose corn syrup. Then we made glucose and dextrose. We made cornstarch. We made alcoholic beverages. And 14% was used for cereals and other, which is mostly corn oil. The reason that these look so terrible is because this is industrial corn. It was bred or genetically modified to be highly productive. It does not produce sweet corn. You don't get corn on the cob. You don't get polenta. These are the best things that you can make with industrial corn. So going back to this issue of feeding the world and micronutrient deficiency, I tried to compute what we get from this corn, these foods, in terms of micronutrients. So I picked my two favorite, vitamin A and folate, and this is what we produce per acre of corn in vitamin A and folate. So here in the first set of column, or the leftmost columns, I have based on our current breakdown of corn usage. So the fact that we only use 48% of it for food or animal feed, that allows us to get about 130 RDAs worth of vitamin A, and about half that for folate out of corn. And now this is based on using the vitamins from corn liver, or corn-fed chicken liver, because that's the only real place that you can get these nutrients from corn. Based on that, if we wanted to maximize the caloric output of our corn and not use it to feed animals, then we eliminate all of the micronutrients that we could produce from corn. On the other hand, if we diverted all of our corn to feeding chickens and creating liver that we could eat, then we would increase the micronutrient delivery of vitamin A and folate by a factor of a few. All right, so what does the corn-based all-food diet get us? Well, it gets us a lot more corn calories, which come mainly as corn sugar, corn oil, and corn starch. It also reduces the already small micronutrient yield of corn. Now, with our current use, we already eat a lot of corn through these mechanisms, and we've produced a huge excess in calories. We produce 3,770 calories per person per day in this country. And 70% of the average American's calories already come from refined grains, added sugars, and refined vegetable oils. So what we're talking about is increasing the number of calories that are available in exactly these forms. We also know that this diet is heavily correlated with high obesity and high rates of type 2 diabetes. So we have to ask ourselves, is this really the diet that we want to use to feed the world? So what could we use our agricultural land for instead of growing corn? Well, I decided to check out organic produce because it's both much more sustainable environmentally and also provides many more essential nutrients than corn. I used crop yields from the USDA Organic Production Survey, and the 22 top products are listed here. They are vegetables and melons, and we harvest these on 118,000 acres. That's all we devote to organic produce compared to the 83 million acres of corn. So how does this compare nutritionally and calorically to corn? So here I've computed the number of calories delivered per acre of organic produce for each of the 22. Okay, so each of the 22 vegetables and melons that were in that survey. And if you total them up, you get 3 million calories per acre. So almost twice as much as we get from our current usages of corn, but only 60% of what we could get if we used all our corn for food. Now, of course, the key thing is the micronutrients. So, okay, so based on these foods, what can we do for micronutrients? So I plotted the best case scenario for micronutrients using corn, which is by diverting all of our corn to growing chicken. Okay, well, I'll just tell you. Vitamin A. So we can produce 380-ish RDAs of vitamin A with corn. If we grew an acre of carrots using organic production methods, we could produce 750,000 RDAs of carrots. So for the same 380-something people that you could provide their RDA of vitamin A from an acre of corn, you could provide them 5+ years of their RDA for vitamin A from an acre of carrots.
Right.
All right, and that's what I showed here. Now, if you look at folate, the numbers are a little bit different. Yes. And for folate, we see again a huge increase over what we can do with corn, and any vegetable that you want to grow, or the whole variety of vegetables that we do grow, would provide similarly much better numbers than we're going to ever get with corn. Okay, so looking at corn versus vegetables, corn delivers more calories, that is true, but in a form that is not independent food. And it produces minimal essential micronutrients and only from the animals that are fed with corn. And I think one of the important things to recognize about this, and what the problem is that we talk about corn as this very productive crop that's going to create all these calories. But if we still have to generate just as many calories in different forms to put together an actual wholesome diet, then we're not really gaining anything from growing corn. And so corn is already a very wasteful system. The way that we grow it, monocultures require vast natural resources, chemical inputs, and money. And that means that they're not going to be environmentally sustainable, and they're going to be very difficult to access for poor farmers who make up most of the hungry people in the world. When we look at organic agriculture, okay, we do get fewer calories than we would get if we grew corn, if we used our corn differently. But we also get prodigious micronutrients, and we get directly edible food. This is the stuff that we can eat. It's more environmentally sustainable, and some studies have shown that it can produce more food and more calories in the types of marginal environments where the poor and hungry live. However, it does require labor and knowledge. So one more thing about this calorie issue. Worldwide, we produce more than 2,700 calories per person per day. That's more than enough to feed everyone. Even in the countries with the highest percentages of hunger, all but 2 have enough calories, and those 2 have within 100 calories of what they need to feed everyone in their countries every day. And that's what Tess and I had presented last year. The reality is that world hunger is caused by inequality and poverty, it's caused by political instability, and it's caused by lack of infrastructure. And those are the areas that we need to be working in if we want to end world hunger. Simply producing more calories is not going to do it. And producing corn specifically will never produce the micronutrients that we need to nourish the world. And so I would conclude that organic agriculture is worth the trade-off and potential calories for the micronutrients that we can get. And I do want to say a few words about meat, because what I think I've shown is that feeding animals is probably the best nutritional use for this industrial corn. But that system has many additional downsides. Both corn and capos, the confined feeding operations, are resource intensive, provide many negative outputs, they're environmentally unsustainable, and they're very stressful and unhealthy for animals. And they do end up with a steep loss in calories when you go from grains to meat. But that doesn't mean we can't eat animals. It just means that we should be using pasture-raised animals that rely on solar power and foodstuffs that are inedible to us. When a cow eats grass and then we eat it, we're not trading off calories between stuff that we could eat and stuff that we can't eat. So this is a much better system. So instead of putting our little X over this transition, we should put an X here. and grow far fewer grains. So how do we fix the food system to feed the world? Well, I think the most important thing is supporting this idea of nutrition-based decision-making for domestic and world policy. I've shown, I think, that focusing solely on calories does not really provide a complete picture of the problems that we face. And I think that that's where we need to start when we ask the question of what is the right balance of produce, meat, and other types of foods that we're going to grow. We also need to support agroecological research. This is an area that is really underdeveloped. We don't know the true potential for organic style agriculture or for polyculture. And that's what we need to know in order to optimize food output and sustainability. And certainly we should tailor our practices to regional conditions to get the most out of the land that we have. Another is that we need to support farmer regulation reform. And that's more than just ending grain subsidies. We need to make sure that there are price supports and regulations in place so that this is an economically viable system. And last, and what I would ask from all of you, is to stand up against industrial agriculture and factory farms. We need your voices to say grains are not the way we want to go. So I've put up some logos of organizations that I think are doing some really great work in this area. If this is something that is interesting to you, I would encourage you to get involved with those organizations or to come talk to me. I'm happy to have help to do more work like this and provide people with better understanding of how we're going to feed the world. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, we actually have 7 minutes for questions right now, so we can have a discussion.
I went over last year, so making up for it.
Okay, questions.
When you were looking at the amount of vitamin A that was in the various plants, is that beta-carotene or vitamin A, or do you need to make the distinction?
I did not make the distinction. So I used a wonderful website called Nutrition Data, which you can find at nutritiondata.self.com, and they listed micronutrients for vitamin A. They did not call it beta-carotene.
So I'll devil's advocate you. What if we switched all to sweet corn instead of using the agricultural corn or the industrial corn? Sorry.
Well, we have a lot more micronutrients. So sweet corn is only about as productive as other types of vegetables. And so we could grow all sweet corn, which I don't think makes much sense. If you're going to switch to vegetables, you might as well switch to all vegetables. And what you might have noticed in my very small table, my list of foods, I believe sweet corn is on this list. Okay, never mind. So yes, sweet corn is already being produced, and we can eat it, and it's a fine vegetable. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say people aren't going to want to eat that many calories of just corn on the cob.
So any amazing ideas of getting rid of subsidies for corn and other monocrops?
You mean as far as how to do it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I would have 2 answers to that. The first one is to get involved with some of the lobbying organizations that are already pushing for that. So the Union of Concerned Scientists is doing some great work in what their policy advocacy, what they think we ought to be pushing for. And really, we just all need to make our voices heard. Lots and lots of people are against grain subsidies. I don't think very many of them call their congressperson. I don't think very many of them go and lobby when their representatives are in their home state. And that's something that has to be done. So as Tess mentioned, I'm a planetary scientist by training, and I went and lobbied Congress on an issue of more funding for the type of research that I do. And one of the things that I learned is that they pay a lot of attention. They told me that they pay attention to what's on Twitter. They pay attention to what's on Facebook. So just talking about these things and letting it be known that you support it or you don't support it is important. I also heard from another scientist that they were told by a senator that when they get 3 letters, 3, on a topic, that's enough to make them consider changing their vote on that topic. Because they figure if there's 3 people willing to sit down and write a letter and send it out, there must be a whole horde of other people who really care about that issue. So I would say take charge of the fact that you are a citizen and you have a right to be heard in this country and tell people what you want.
I just want to answer his question about sweet corn. You have to be worried about corn allergy, just like we know.
Can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about, to answer the question about sweet corn, we may have to start worrying about corn allergies, like we were worried about wheat allergies now. So that may not be a good solution.
Well, I would say that there's a slight difference between wheat allergies from this type of wheat and corn allergies versus this type of corn. Yeah, we might not want to eat industrial corn, and that could be something that irritates us. I don't think there's a real problem with sweet corn. If you're going to grow a vegetable, why not grow 22 vegetables? Why not grow 100 vegetables? Those are the kinds of systems, diversified farming systems, are the ones that get the most output, because different vegetables grown together, different crops grown together, even having some grains in there or legumes, maximizes the output of your system.
All right, last question here.
You talked a lot about how we as the U.S. could solve world hunger. It seems to me that this is more of an issue of distribution, and Western efforts to combat world hunger have done very poorly. How much of this do you think is more a matter of countries being unable to feed themselves due to bad policies on their part and bad policies of the West? For example, giving away grains and destroying local markets.
There are a lot of aspects to the answer of that question, but I will first say that last year when we looked at these issues, we looked at the calories in individual countries. Those are the calories in those countries. And we found that almost no countries, despite having 60% of their people being food insecure, really suffered from a lack of calories. So I just don't think that calories are the issue. And as far as us feeding the world, the things that we can do to help are to find solutions that are right for a given community. So there's a group that looks at fertilizer and water usage. There are many places in the world where fertilizer and water usage could be applied that would actually improve yields. Whereas here, we overuse those things to the extent that we no longer can increase our yields. So I think that we can help. What you're saying is true. We shouldn't be helping by throwing grain at them.
Or anything.
Or maybe anything, right? But efforts to help farmers to produce their own food is really what the key is.
All right, let's thank Alyssa again.